What's your story? What's your sign? It's like we're twin flames in a different life. Deep connection lights a spark. It's like you know me in the depths of my heart. We're dreamers. Don't care what other people say. We're living. Life is could be a final day. We're dreamers. Don't care what the others say. We're doing this in our way. We come alive in the nighttime. It's something about how we dance in the moonlight. That look in your eyes, it tells me that you want me and all my loving. We come alive in the nighttime. You and I, we come alive. We come alive. We come alive. What's your weakness? What's your type? Somehow I wanna know all about you. Deep connection lights a spark. You already know me when we dance in the dark. We're dreamers. We're living. We're dreamers. We're doing this in our way. We come alive in the nighttime. It's something about how we dance in the moonlight. That look in your eyes, it tells me that you want me and all my loving. We come alive in the nighttime. You and I, we come alive. Oh, oh, we come alive. We come alive. Oh, we come alive. Tell me that you want me. I can see you want me by the look in your eyes. Tell me that you want me. I can see you want me by the look in your eyes. We come alive. We come alive. We come alive in the nighttime. It's something about how we dance in the moonlight. That look in your eyes, it tells me that you want me and all my loving. We come alive in the nighttime. You and I, we come alive. Oh, 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 we come alive. We come alive. Oh, 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 we come alive.
What's up, everyone? Conrad Neufeld here. What's up, everyone? Conrad Neufeld here, and today we are joined with Dominic from ReMax, and we're going to talk about whether or not real estate agents still bring value in a day and age where we can list our homes online, when we can find all the information or seemingly all the information online. So to do that, like I said, we brought in Dominic Montpetit. Dominic, welcome. And all the information or seemingly all the information online.
Hey, how's it going?
Like I said, we brought in Dominic Montpetit. Dominic, welcome. Give us 2 seconds. All the information or seemingly all. I love live.
I want you, you want only you. said. What's your story? What's your sign? It's like we're twin flames in a different life. Deep connection lights a spark. It's like you know me in the depths of my heart. We're dreamers. Don't care what other people say. We're living like this could be a final day. We're dreamers. Don't care what the others say. We're doing this in our way. We come alive in the nighttime. It's something about how we dance in the moonlight. That look in your eyes, it tells me that you want me and all my loving. We come alive in the nighttime. You and I, we come alive. We come alive. We come alive. What's your weakness? What's your type? Somehow I wanna know all about you. Deep connection lights a spark. You already know me when we dance in the dark. We're dreamers. We're living. We're dreamers. We're doing this in our way. We come alive in the nighttime. It's something about how we dance in the moonlight. That look in your eyes, it tells me that you want me and all my loving. We come alive in the nighttime. You and I, we come alive. Oh, 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 we come alive. We come alive. Oh, oh, we come alive. Tell me that you want me. I can see you want me by the look in your eyes. Tell me that you want me. I can see you want me by the look in your eyes. We come alive. We come alive. We come alive in the nighttime. There's something about how we dance in the moonlight. That look in your eyes, it tells me that you want me and all my loving. We come alive in the nighttime. You and I, we come alive. Oh, 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 we come alive. We come alive. Oh, 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 we come alive. We come alive.
I freaking love live. So while he's figuring out his technical difficulties, I'm going to tell a story because this is ironic that this happens to be the live stream where an error occurs. Because right prior to this, when I was talking to Dominic backstage prior to going live, I was like, I've been fortunate. We've never had an issue with technical difficulties or anything like that before. Well, I cursed myself. But I was telling him a story about how when I was young in my career, I had just graduated from university. I was selling masonry supplies. And I know this is completely unrelated to the stream, but because of the technical difficulties, we got time. But so I was new to masonry, and our company had just sponsored this award at this home builder event. And so they're like, Conrad, you know what? You're a pretty good speaker. Why don't you go up and present the award? And so I was like, yeah, why not? And so they even asked me, like, prior to going, they're like, do you have anything written down? Do you have a script or something like that? I'm like, nah, don't worry about it. I'll wing it. So not a great idea, as you can imagine, because as time went on and as I went up, I had a kid at the time, and so I was like completely exhausted. And so just give me a second here. Dominic was texting me, trying to figure it out. So as I get up there and I'm starting to present, to this day, I actually have no idea what I even said while I was on stage. All I know and all I remember was the looks on people's faces. When when you're listening to something so incredibly embarrassing that you're just like you feel embarrassed for them, right? Like to the point where you're just like, please stop talking, like just end the embarrassment for everyone involved. Well, that's kind of like as I'm like halfway through this sentence, and I don't even know how I started it, but I do know I most certainly didn't know how the sentence was going to end. I like looked out at the faces, so everybody was like, "Hey, just stop." And so I did. I stopped right in the middle of my sentence. I got up, like, and I just walked and I sat back down. And one of my coworkers at the time, he looked at me and he was like, "Oof." He's like, "That's rough," and it was. But what I learned from that was a few things. One, things can go wrong. Two, I mean, you can do your best to try to hedge against it, but when things go wrong, they go wrong. And three, the one thing I do know is that nobody remembered that day. Like it meant a lot to me, but no one remembered it. But I mean, I'm sure people will remember, well, because it'll be on YouTube forever. The fact that I have technical difficulties right now. Anyways, that was the story. So Dominic is going to try to relog back in, and when he does, then I will reintroduce him, and we will talk about whether real estate agents have value or not. In the meantime, the one thing I think a lot of people are going to assume when you have an event like this and you bring on a realtor, a lot of people are naturally going to say, well, of course you're going to say realtors bring value and they're good and everything else. Anybody who truly knows me knows that I am a no bullshit kind of guy. Like I just say it how it is. And so in this case, like I'll tell you, 80% of realtors right off the hop, like they are useless. They are not worth a dime. So what we're going to focus on is that other 20%, the ones that are actually pretty good at their job, whether they're still worth it, whether, a FSBO route makes sense. And we're going to go forward with that. But it looks like he's got his tech figured out. So without further ado, Dominic from ReMax. How you doing?
Great. How are you doing, Conrad?
I'm doing good.
Sorry about that. We got
no
it
worries.
all,
You know what's
all
funny?
sorted out.
It's this prior week, I was like, I should, just in case there's like some like technical difficulties, like because I have a bunch of videos queued up for like the intros and the outros. I'm like,
Yeah.
I should do one just in case there's technical difficulties. And then I was like, nah, I could do that next week. Damn it.
Oh boy.
So anyways, tell me a bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, I've been in real estate for over 4 years now. Got into it when I was pretty young. And before, like the reason I wanted to join real estate was I just really had a passion for houses, and I love people. So I figured it'd be a good fit. Growing up, my family and I, we traveled across North America doing concerts for kids. So
hence the drum set behind you there.
Yeah, exactly. So, got to see a lot of different houses and areas and lots of neat people. And, I figured it'd be a really good fit. And I love it so far.
That's cool. Good. And you seem relatively young, so you'll be into your career, I'm sure, for decades to come, hopefully. But like just prior to this, I was mentioning that, like 80% of realtors I think are, well, yeah, they're garbage. They're terrible, man. Like I don't pull punches. They're awful. But the other 20%, I think they're good at their job. And we'll cover whether that makes sense or not, like if they still bring value. But before we do that, I'm going to throw it to you. For anybody who's watching out there, what makes a good real estate agent? Like, how would they know that they're dealing with someone who is a good agent versus, one that potentially isn't?
Well, it's I think there's a lot of different factors. I think one of the biggest ones is trust, right? You want to be able to trust your realtor. And I think that comes from, building a relationship and a connection. And, I think it's important for people to know that, I mean, you don't have to just meet with one realtor. You can interview as many as you want, really.
Right.
And try and find that good fit and someone that is going to take really good care of you and look after your best interests.
It's funny that you mentioned trust, and I agree mostly. I have a caveat there where like sometimes we'll have like an uncle or an aunt or a cousin twice removed from your sister's brother's uncle's dog side or whatever, right? That theoretically you should trust because they're like blood related or whatever. And yet that like the trust goes so far, but if they don't know anything, they don't know anything. I find often like in unison with trust, like you have to have both.
Totally.
I find the number one thing that I do is I'll ask a question. And if I feel like they're bullshitting the answer, rather than saying like, look, I don't know, then that to me speaks volumes. Like when someone says, look, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. Right. That means way more to me. I don't care that they don't know. The fact that they're going to go find out is great. Right. I don't expect everybody to know everything. How could you? Right.
Yeah.
That whole thing where it's like, they just come up with an answer like right on the spot. And it's like, oh man, if you're doing that now, you're probably going to do that later.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter now, but it's probably going to matter later. You know what I mean? So I think it's both. But even then, like once trust is gone, I mean, well, I'll give you an example. So I was looking at buying a property down in Regina. It's a little bit different because it's a commercial building.
Yeah.
We're standing there though, and I'm looking at the building, and number one question I ask, why are you selling? Right? Makes sense. You know, you want to know why the guy's liquidating that property. And he's like, well, you know what? We're just too busy. We're getting rid of our portfolio. Okay, great. So next question, then that makes sense to me. Next question I ask, and this is like a little while later. I'm just like, look at if you're selling your properties, you know, let me know. I'm in the market to buy multiple properties. He goes, no, we're just selling this one. I was like, okay, wait a second here. Yeah. Like, didn't you just say that you were liquidating your properties, but now it's only this one? Okay, well, so that was red flag number one. And then the second one came a little while later when he's like, man, you know, I was like, well, why'd you pick this one then if you're not selling off the rest? He's like, honestly, it's just because we're busy and this one is just too much time to manage. Okay, fair enough. So, you know, some properties require more work than others. But half an hour later, we're looking at the security camera in his boiler room because he had security cameras outfitted for this property, which most properties don't, but this one did. And he's like, look with this advanced like security camera, it's so easy to manage. You could manage it from a different city. And I was like, okay, wait a second. Like, didn't you just say that you're getting rid of this one because it requires too much of your time? Right. So like instantly the trust is gone. Like I'm not going to believe a thing that comes out of this guy's mouth. So I think you're right. Trust is definitely a big portion of it, but that's a good one. Now, you know, FSBOs, where we live in the day and age of technology where I think there's more data, not necessarily more wisdom than prior, but there's more data available to the average person. What's your thoughts on FSBOs? What's the drawbacks? Why, like, that ultimately is, you know, the crux of the conversation in a sense, right? You can go with the FSBO. Why bother paying a realtor on the buying side, let's say, or on the selling side? I'll let you make some comments on that.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of it is, I mean, the first thing I think people will want to sell by themselves or through, you know, Sask houses is, I want to save money and I don't want to pay commissions. That's typically the biggest reason. But it's funny because a lot of times people will list their houses by themselves, and a lot of times a realtor will end up selling it for them down the road because it didn't sell. Right. But I think people, and again, I come back to interviewing different realtors, and I think people need to ask, what value is this realtor going to provide for me? What are they doing?
Right.
And I think when you look at what does a realtor do, every realtor is different, obviously. And then you kind of dive into their marketing package, what they're going to do, and you're hiring the realtor. So you want to make sure that they're going to work for you and not just put the house on MLS and wave goodbye, right?
The property dump, put it online, hope someone buys it. And although that would have worked really well in 2020 and 2021, right? Like the market was so hot, you literally just had to say, hey, I got a property, right? But even then, so there's a few points there, right? Because you had mentioned they often like end up getting a realtor to end up selling their place. And the national stat, by the way, is 10%. 10% of homes that get listed on some kind of FSBO, like for sale by owner, only 10% actually sell through that for sale by owner. The other 90% eventually do go to a realtor to be sold. And I think the number one reason why that is and this is going to sound harsh, but the delusion of what your home is worth, right? Like that home is your baby. It's where you raised your kids. It's where you got them to stand on a wall and you marked the height, as they grew up. Like that means
Totally.
more than, drywall and stone, right? And so that I think is where a lot of people price. They'll look down the neighborhood and they'll go, well, that home sold for this. Mine's better because, and then they'll like unobjectively price their home higher. And then it's not until later where all of a sudden the realtors come in and they have to give them that hard pill to swallow, saying like, look, at your property just isn't worth that. Right. Like, and so like, do you know who's like Zillow?
Yeah.
So Zillow just recently, they basically pulled a purple brick. They used AI and data to try to figure out like the valuations of housing, and even AI got it wrong. Like often enough that like Zillow lost a fortune, like a small fortune from like inaccurately assessing these property valuations. So it is as much science as it is art, right? And being able to figure out like the little nuances and stuff like that. But I think that's mostly why people are like, oh, we're going to save so much money, but they have a lot of delusion as far as like I said, what their home is worth. Now you had mentioned too, like the other side of that coin, listing it on like just taking the property and listing on FSBO, or not on FSBO, but like on MLS. Obviously you have seen some agents do that. What more should a realtor be doing than just listing it on MLS?
Well, there's, I mean, a bunch of different things. I mean, you want professional photography. You want to stay up to date and ahead of the game with all technology as far as, are we doing drone footage? Are we doing Matterport tours? The marketing side of things. And then I think another thing that's really important is word of mouth and talking to other realtors. So in my brokerage, we talk about, oh, we got a listing coming up. Do you got any buyers for it? Or I might look through my client base and see, like, you got to be constantly talking about things and meeting with people. And the more people the more people you talk to. It's crazy how many
and
houses.
what you're referring to is a back pocket listing. That's what that's called, right? Where realtors like have basically in the listing in their back pocket, but it hasn't necessarily made the market and might not necessarily make the market.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
Like it
Or
might
it's
get sold prior.
Yeah, like I've had some cases where, I'm showing houses to buyers and the neighbors outside, hey, how do you like the area? And we start chatting and he ends up wanting to sell, and my buyers, we end up buying his house. So it's funny how, the more you talk about something, you promote it, you got to get it out there.
And further to that, like if you do the flip side of that, the one thing that I think people underestimate is where the incentives lie. All right. Like obviously if a realtor if you're using a realtor to buy or sell, there's an incentive for that agent to see that transaction go through. There's an incentive to actually bring people to make that transaction occur in the first place. And I think a lot of FSBOs forget, like people who are trying to do for sale by owners, I think they forget that, because what I've commonly see is that when something gets listed on a for sale by owner, most real estate agents aren't eager to like show that home for starters, because why on earth would they? They're not going to get paid. Right? If there's a comparable home that's going to fit their client's needs just fine, and it's similar and comparable to the other one, but they can make money by doing that. Well, guess which one they're going to show? And that might sound like dirty pool. That might sound unfair. That's just a reality. I mean, that is human nature at its core.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
And so a lot of these for sale by owners, they list their houses and like, no realtor showed my place. It's like, well, no shit. Like, did you expect someone to?
Yeah. And it's I find it's sad actually, just because, as a buyer's agent, if you're looking out for your client's best interests and you see something that might really fit their criteria, I've actually done quite a few recently where, I help negotiate for the buyers for a for sale by owner, and it ends up working out really well. So I think,
but that right there is one of the reasons why you're a good agent, because most, I don't think, would do that. You have a certain high level of ethics, which I think is a good thing. It's also the reason why you're you're on the show to begin with, because I know things like that, right? Like there are many people, and I've seen it over and over and over again, that play those games. And here's the thing. You have to understand that while that's true, while you don't do that, while you actually have a genuine interest in your client, and yeah, there's ways that you can get paid in the back end and all that other stuff, and so that you're still being written into the deal, whether that happens or not, that's entirely like up to you. But you know, the people have to understand that whether it's good or not, it happens frequently. And like we said before, like I said, 80% I would say are not great, right? So 4 in every 5 are not great. So even if there's 1 out of 5 who's going to show your house, that may not be enough, right? You may not have enough interest in your house if you take that route. And like, yeah, I don't know. I just think that that's a real problem, that a lot of these, and that could be one of the reasons, that could be another reason, not one, like could be another reason why a lot of these homeowners eventually just have to list on MLS, because it's more than that, because there's certain for sale by homeowners too that the listing service allows it to be listed on MLS. So it's not even like look at Sask Houses as an example, allows you to be listed on MLS, and that they still probably have an equal, I don't know what their track record is like, but they probably have an equal to the national average of 10%. That's my guess. Yeah. Right. Even though they're on MLS. So it's more than just pricing, although I'm sure pricing is part of it. It's that as well.
Well, the other thing too, I find is, I mean, your home, that's one of the biggest transactions of your life. And you want to make sure there's going to be no issues. If you're advertising yourself and you're, giving wrong information or not doing certain things, or that's whether it's something on title or something comes back to you, you want to try to avoid issues down the road. And I think realtors can help with that, right? One of the things I try and do is solve problems before they happen, because real estate, every deal is different and there's always something that can come up, right? But if we can try and ask questions with our sellers and figure out, stuff that could come up when we get an offer, let's try and figure that out now, so we have all the info we need to sell the property in the best state.
Take it from a small little fire and put it out while it's a small little fire, then rather than when it's a blaze. Like there's this concept in marketing called perfect and imperfect markets, right? Like if you go to university for marketing or whatever, like that's a topic that you would cover. And this concept of perfect market, or a perfect market, means that everybody equally and unilaterally has this access to the same information, right? So I'm privy to the same information that the seller's privy to, the same information that the buyer is privy to, and on and on and on. Everybody's got the same amount of information, and everybody gets to sing kumbaya because everybody knows the value of the given good. Yeah. And real estate is very much an imperfect market, meaning the information that one individual have may be more or less than the other party involved in that transaction. And oftentimes the seller in that case is the one privy to most of the information in that transaction, where the buyer is not, right? Yeah. And there are many cases where it's played out. I mean, look at with BC as an example. Right. BC is now doing this cooling off period, as like that was just recently announced. Right.
Yeah.
That exists for a reason. Right. Like there must be a lot of buyers that have like rushed into the deal, like unconditional offers, no inspections, no whatevers. And now, whoops. Right. Because you can hide a lot. Oh, it's amazing what you can hide, actually, even with an inspections aren't perfect. You can hide them even with inspections, but it's amazing what you can miss.
Yeah. Well, and not just, stuff with the property. Let's say a buyer doesn't know, they're walking in with writing an offer, no conditions, and they don't know, for example, in Saskatchewan here with insurance, aluminum wiring is becoming a big issue, where most won't even lend home insurance without electrical compliance report, or actually taking out the aluminum wiring. So if you buy a house, you're getting ready for possession, you're getting insurance, and it's all aluminum wiring, that could cause lots of issues.
All sorts of headaches. Yeah.
So there's just little things like that, doing deals all the time and being in the industry, I'm constantly learning all this info that I'm doing my best to relay to my buyers, my sellers, just so that we can have a smooth transaction.
Right. And that experience sometimes goes taken for granted in a lot of ways. It's funny. So like I'll have for sale by owner clients on my end as a mortgage broker, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny to me. It's not funny. It's funny, but it's not. Where people will be like, I'm going to save so much money, right? And then I feel like I'm the realtor because they have so many questions and like just and it's like, well, your realtor would have known that. Well, your realtor, and there's some that like some of the processes I can be like, oh yeah, happy to help. This is what you would do. This is what you would do. And they can help you through some of the process. But then they'll like text me like questions about their property. I'm like, I don't know. And even if I did, I can't actually even tell you because I'm not licensed as a realtor. Like I can't just give like financial or real estate advice willy-nilly. Like there's a reason why you have to be licensed for that so that people make credible, like reliable statements. And I'm like, I could tell you anything like, I don't know. So, and what ends up happening is these people end up making a complete mess of it more than you'd think on the for sale by owner side, because it is like their second time buying a home or their third time buying a home. But regardless if they had bought their 30th, the 31st deal that they do might be nothing like the first 30 that they did.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's like, I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mortgages. And, you know, to this day, there's still mortgages that come up and go, never had that before.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. And things change. Right. So I would say there's even more than that. There's actual legal risks of not using an agent because you guys have insurance and everything else in the event that you miss some stuff, right? Like errors and admissions and right.
Totally. Yeah.
So like, what does that all cover? Like, have you ever, I mean, obviously you've never had to use it before, but do you know like any stories regarding like, where like issues?
Yeah, I know there's lots of stories that I've heard. You can actually look up certain things where agents didn't do their due diligence or were fined for something. You can actually look up, the list, but I mean, there's certain things where, a realtor wasn't ethical or something happened and they end up getting sued or whatever it is. Right.
Right.
So
hence my first question, how do you know a good agent? Right. Because that's part of it. Because there's like, when you're dealing with imperfect information, there's an additional layer on there that realtor is imperfect as well. And unfortunately, if the carrot is big enough, they might try to ram that transaction through, whether or not it's a good fit for you or not. So even more reason, I guess, to circle back to your trust point, even more reason why you'd want them to be trusting, right? Like to have trust in that realtor to know that you're not going to. And it's funny. I'll add on that. I think your age is a big advantage because, and this is no slight against the older guys at all, but I think that when you're at the start of your career, you care a lot more about those relationships than at the end of your career. Do you know what I mean? Because you're the one that's going to have to live with it for 20 years. Like if you totally do something stupid and wreck your reputation, like you're done, right? Like for the next 20 years, right? Like you're just done. Whereas if you're like 64 years old, you're like, we'll cut that corner. We'll cut that corner. And I see it, right? Like, I'm just like, oh, you're experienced, but you're cutting corners. You shouldn't. Like,
and I care so much about each client just because it's, you're buying a home, you're selling a home. It's such a big investment and a big part of your life that, I try and take all the steps necessary to make sure that, they're making a good informed decision. And even if there is, when I'm with buyers, I try and bring up every house as many issues or possible scenarios, whether it's poor grading and they could have water issues down the road, or I try and point out as many issues so just that, they're aware of any possible things that can come
fix
up
them and rectify them before they're big problems. Yeah.
Totally. So if you get a good price for the home, you just know what you got to do, or you got to put into it, right, to make it good.
Or use that during the price negotiations, right?
Totally.
I think a lot of people miss that too, right? Where they're just like, oh, I can negotiate, but they don't know how much to negotiate for when something needs to be done, right? Like, and it's not always, well, the grading needs to be fixed, so they'll pay, the seller's going to pay for the whole thing. Well, that's not quite how it works, right? Like maybe it's 80%, maybe it's 50%. I think it depends on the house or the market, the whatever, right? Like there's lots that go into that.
Yeah.
So you must see that too, though, from your perspective, having a lot of different different tactics and skills when trying to get the best value for the house, right?
Oh, totally. And I think negotiation is a super important part and skill that an agent should have. Just because when it comes to price, you're trying to negotiate. There's different tactics and different things you can do. I try, to read books, to listen to interviews on negotiating, and I enjoy learning about that kind of stuff just so I can bring more value to clients, right?
But even like knowing the tricks, just so you know to watch out for them as well, right?
Oh, totally.
Like, and I know I've told this story before, but there was a time when, like, this is back when I was like a new mortgage broker, so it was like 10 years ago, pretty much. I was sitting in a show home with a realtor, and the realtor, like, and so I'm sitting there with the show home. People are coming in. I'm trying to pre-qualify them or whatever. And there was like a little bit of a lull. And I was looking around the room, and I am not much for fashion, right? I mean, I will be the first to admit that my wife dresses me, right? Like I have terrible style when it comes to picking clothes. So she just does that for me. But like, even I was like, wow, that is an ugly, ugly area rug. Like that is like, and this is coming from me. So I'm like, just, that's how bad it was. Like it was clearly out of place. And so of course, there's nobody around, just me and the realtor. I was like, man, that's an ugly area rug, eh? And then she's like, I brought that one. And I was like, oh shit. And so I was like, oh, okay. Like, why'd you bring the area rug? And she's like, I was like, oh, it looks good. She's like, I know it doesn't look good or whatever. And she's like, I just brought it because, they have dogs and they scratched up all the flooring. So I'm covering it with this area rug. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh. Like that's the point of the area rug, is to hide, right? So that they can get a better sell price, right? And unless you have an agent that knows there are agents that will do that, or people that will do that, they don't know to pick up the rug and go, that's $2,000. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's a subtle difference, but it's a big one. And when they all add up. Yeah.
Yeah. I always try to, if there's something that looks fishy in a home, you try and lift up the rug or you do something, you never know what you're going to find.
Right? You know what it's like. 100%. So like, do you think there's, talking about, an agent, like a real estate agent to sell versus a real estate agent to buy, is there like a benefit of like, yeah, you should definitely do it if you're buying versus if you're selling? Because like, I'll have some people, for instance, be like, well, it costs you nothing to buy, so you might as well use an agent when you're buying, but avoid it when you're selling, right? Does that, like, I know that mentality exists, but is that like a real thing? Or is it like you should use an agent no matter what? Like, I have a feeling you know what you're saying, but then I'm going to add my comments on it.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to, there's some people that have sold lots of houses by themselves and they just enjoy doing it. And like, I don't mind, like, that's awesome. If people want to do it and they do a good job at it and they have the time, then totally, they should try and sell by themselves if they know what they're doing. But yeah, I think an agent brings lots of value on both sides. And again, an agent's job is to look after your best interests. So that's to get you the best price if you're selling or buying, and look out for, all different things that could come up, and ask questions so that, you feel prepared. And I think another big thing is time. I talked to one of my clients who, I just asked them, like, what value did you see, myself bringing to you when I was selling your house? And one of the first things was like, I don't have the time. And I was super happy that you took the time, you know what you're doing, you handled it, because time is valuable, right? So I think time comes into play when you're selling too. If someone's constantly showing the house and they're getting no offers, they're spending all that time showing when they could be out, whether you own your own business or whatever it is, you could be spending time with family or doing something. I think time is valuable too. So that, I think comes into play when you're selling as well.
I also think the biggest one for me is that it takes the emotion out of both the purchase and it takes the emotion out of the sale, right? Like I
Totally.
talked earlier about the, the emotion. This is your baby, this is your house, and nobody loves it quite like you. That also works in purchases as well, where people, they see a house, they get all excited about it and everything else, and then they just get so laser focused and they can't see like why they should be stepping away from that deal potentially, or going to a different deal or a different house or a different whatever, or they get so emotionally attached to the house that they'll overpay for it, or they'll, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I've had it multiple times where it's like, um, you know, people end up just chatting about, their story, and then you hear where they're coming from, and you want to understand, the reason behind their purchase or their sale, so that you can really help them, manage certain expectations, or, some people are really, they get so attached, and then let's say something comes up in a home inspection. You want to just manage their expectations and kind of, walk them through the steps. And, if they get super attached, then it can affect the price, right? You want to make sure, they're getting the value there. I always look at resale, right? If they're going to be selling in 5 years, is it going to be easy to sell?
Right. That's a good one.
Are they going to overpay, and then it's going to cause
Yep.
issues down the road? Or, looking into, what could be built across the street? Is it going to be, multifamily units coming up, or like, what is it going to be commercial? That could the value. So you always, want to look ahead on the purchasing side. Then on the selling side, there's certain attachments to the house, and you want to get so much for it. But if you list it way too high, it ends up sitting there taking days on market.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to affect your sale price, because people think there's something wrong with it, or it's been on the market for so long,
Yeah.
you don't want to look at it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you come in with an accurate price, then you can typically get way more for the house than if you try and listing it way higher, and then it sits there and you don't do anything with it, right?
And further to that point, so you talked about how you read like negotiating books and stuff like that. I'm going to struggle to remember which book it was. I used to read a book a week, so that I read a lot of books, but some of them were on pricing and marketing and everything else. On that concept of someone thinks that something's wrong with it because its DOM is too high, its days on market is too high.
Yeah.
So there was a story about in the States where there was a liver transplant that needed to be there's a waiting list for liver transplants. A liver comes up, and so they go to the first person on the list. And this is like a study that had been repeated, and they demonstrated this over and over again. So the first person gets offered the liver, and the first person goes, actually, I can't come in that Tuesday. I'll make the next one for whatever. I'm just too ill. I just can't come in Tuesday. I'll come in for the next one. So they go, okay, great. We still have a liver. We have to use it. So they go to the second person. And then they found if the second person declined it too, by the time it got to the third person, and it wasn't too long after, by the time it got to the third person was like, what the hell's wrong with that liver? I don't want to take my spot out. I don't want to pull myself out of the queue for a good liver and take this subpar liver. So then it goes down to the fourth, and then the fifth, and then the sixth. And then everybody assumes that it's just a crap liver because everybody above them has declined it. But it started because those first two declined it. And that's what happens is on this days on market, right? Even though the liver was perfectly fine, this days on market, it's sitting there, the days are accruing, and people have it in their head. And it's hard not to, right? It's like, well, if nobody else wants it, why should I want it? Right? Like, what's wrong with it? There's got to be something. Or if it like gets like listed at one price and then it comes back, it's like, oh, that was a whole other listing. I remember seeing it at this price and they relisted it. What's going on? Right? There's something to be said for pricing it right out of the gates and knowing that value, because if it does sit on the days on market for too long, there's a chance that people will even not intentionally, just unintentionally think something's wrong with it, which might command a lower selling price as a result. Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, again, as a selling agent, if you do end up pricing a little bit high and you get feedback, house shows well, but it feels like it's priced a bit high, then let's cancel the listing and relist it, and not wait till a
But you're
month
making quick
goes
adjustments.
by and then you haven't done anything with it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. But
So
you're
that's
making
where
quick adjustments.
you got
Yeah.
to take the feedback and, list it. Another thing that I find interesting with, if you're selling by yourself or with a realtor has that, they're the third party involved and can point out stuff about the house that you probably might not have thought because you're living in there and you see stuff every day, where a realtor comes in and they're going to give their input on certain things, or they could help with, prepping the house, getting it ready, or do we bring in
Staging. It's a big one.
like a stager, or like
Yeah.
there's all those different things that come into play as well.
Like the psychology behind, if you walk into a house and you see someone else's pictures, you're less likely to relate to it. And that's a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and decluttering, or there's, lots of different things. And that's where bringing in a stager is nice, because that's what they do, right? So if I hire them, they can come in and do their thing and get the house ready to go.
Yeah. But even then, like, that's what we mentioned, like, about those FSBOs, right? Those for sale by owners. There's not a lot of them don't have those skills, right? I don't have those skills. I'm in the industry.
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like I would know more than the average person to sell my home, but I know that I would still get somebody else. Like, I would still hire a realtor to sell it versus sell it myself, even though I know enough about it, just because I feel like, they might. And for me, it actually would be time too, right? Because the time,
Yeah.
like you had mentioned it. So the number one question that people always, tend to bring to me is, like, do real estate agents get paid too much? Right? Like, that's the
Yeah.
big one. Are they paid too much? So, and maybe you can set the record straight, so to speak, about realtor compensation, because not all of it goes to you, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, because realtors, we have a lot of expenses. So when you pay a realtor, a portion of it's going to our brokerage for our fees. We're paying for photography, for the Matterport tours, or if it's staging, it's advertising, and it's our knowledge too. One important thing is, I feel like realtors can leverage, local knowledge, and they have relationships built with lawyers, with mortgage brokers, with home inspectors. Sometimes we can get good deals for clients, or we know people in the industry. Like, if I have a question about something on title or whatever it may be, I'll call my lawyer and say, hey, what do you think about this? And then I get an answer right away.
Right.
So
Because you
little
have people
things
you
like
can go
that
to. Yeah.
that brings value. So
But I would also say that's the sign of a good agent,
yeah.
right? Like, there are, well, I'm not going to say many. There's enough agents out there that I can think of that don't have a team. And it's generally because every deal they touch is a nightmare, right? And
Yeah.
so, if you, like, talk to your real estate agent, you're like, hey, do you got a mortgage broker? Hey, do you have a lawyer? Hey, do you have an
Yeah.
appraiser? Hey, do you have a whatever? And their answer is no to all of those.
Yeah.
you probably have a problem.
Yeah.
And it's not the appraisers, it's not the lawyers, it's not the mortgage brokers. The problem is generally the person you're talking to, right? If they can't
Yeah.
play nice with everybody else, they're probably not going to play nice with the seller's agent or the buyer's agent or the whatever, right? Which can cause
Yeah.
all sorts of headaches.
Yeah. And another thing too is, like, with that commission, what is the agent doing? That money gets spread out through a lot of different things, but also, giving back to the community, I think, is important too, as realtors. You know, Sometimes, it's, as well, with our brokerage, we give a percentage to, the Jim Pattison Children's Hospital.
Oh yeah.
But, I'm always thinking, like, what can I do that can be more than that? Or whether it's asking the sellers if they want to make a donation on my behalf of something.
Cool.
I think
Yeah.
giving back is something that, we need to do more of as realtors.
Yeah, not everyone does it though. I know some ones that are pretty pretty cheap.
Yeah.
right? They like I was going to make a joke and say, hey, I should create my own nonprofit and then you can donate to me.
Yeah.
But then you said you went and like you guys donate to like the children's hospital. So then I just sound like an ass if I make that joke. It's like, you want to take from the children's hospital? What's wrong with you? But like I'll give you an example. There was a realtor 2 years ago, and we're like, hey, they were the buyer's agent, and they were buying this place, this acreage, right? And we're like, well, we're going to need the property tax statement because the MLS has an old year on it. We're going to need the property tax statement for the property so the lender can confirm the property taxes for that property. And so the agent calls us, that afternoon. Can't get it. Just can't get it. I was like, what? What do you mean you can't get it? I was like, that should be like a phone call. And he's like, well, I could try again, but I don't think so. He calls us the next day. It's like the morning. And he's like, can't get it. What? And you tried the municipality. Like, you've tried calling like the township or the city or whatever. And they straight up said, no, you can't have the property tax statement. Yep. I was like, wow. Okay. So then I was like, that can't be right. So I called up the township and I was like, hey, can we have the property tax statement? Their answer was, yeah, no problem. So I was like, what the hell? And then he's like, and I was like, oh, okay. Can you send it? Yeah, no worries. You just got to pay the $30 charge first. I'm like, oh, there it is. That's why the realtor couldn't get it. He had to pay the $30 to get he's willing to let his deal crash over the $30 property tax statement. I was like, you gotta be kidding. I was like, just give it to me. I will pay it. Like, come on. But so, yeah, I mean, I wish more realtors did that. I wish more realtors were thought more about like their community and everything else. And, when you have good years, like we had a great year this year as mortgage brokers. And I know we did a lot behind the scenes for all sorts, from animals to humans, right? Like we did all sorts of stuff. And I just feel like I'm not going to sit on a high horse and be like, we are the best. But like, I just feel like there's not enough being done by some of the bigger players, but I guess that's their money. They can do whatever they want. One of the things go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's important to go the extra mile. There's lots of little things that, we end up doing, right? I like to think of being a realtor as, being a problem solver and finding solutions. You're constantly, trying to figure out a way to make something work. And
hence why I said, at the start there, how do you know a good agent? Trust is obviously a big portion because you need to be able to trust them. But you ask them a question, if it sounds like they're bullshitting, you're going to have problems because there's just no way that you can go like through a single like real estate transaction without coming across some kind of obstacle. There's just no way.
Yeah.
Right. And the obstacle isn't going to be the same from transaction to transaction to transaction. It's probably going to be a different obstacle. And so if you've got a guy who's probably going to make crap up, man, that's going to cause so many other problems down the line. And all of a sudden you're missing possession dates, or your deposit is at risk, or like they're trying to rely on Western conveyancing protocols just to take possession on time, but then you're incurring extra interest on the back end. Like there's all sorts of stuff that can happen when people make up junk. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's the important thing. Like things are going to happen sometimes, but it's how do we deal with them? I think that's the important thing.
The implementation. You can have all the great ideas in the world, but implementation matters.
Yeah. And, I think it's being honest too. Like, if a seller asks a question and you don't know, just say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out for you.
Right.
And then, you're attacking certain problems and figuring out solutions with your clients, and you're doing what you can to make things work. And that's where, you're constantly, whether it's making phone calls, meeting someone in person to figure out something, going to the, town office, or like whatever it is.
Town office to go get a property tax statement that's going to cost $30. I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
But that's another thing that I would say on top of all of that is that one of the biggest things that we see, and this is more so from my perspective, is, there are, as a mortgage broker, I get sent a ton of deals from like real estate agents where it's like, my deal's falling apart. Can you put it back together? Right. Like I get those all the time. And that's common because in today's day and age, getting financing during a pandemic, getting a mortgage is not easy. Like I would say it's more difficult than ever before. And I have been saying that I feel like 8 years in a row where I'm just like, it's more difficult than last year. Half the people that qualified last year wouldn't qualify this year. And I feel like I said, like I've been saying that for 8 years in a row. It's just gotten worse and worse, or not worse and worse, harder and harder. Some of the rules that they've changed and made, I agree with. It makes sense. Some of the implementations of the rules I agree with, maybe not, but either way, I agree with them as a whole. But I feel like agents can, for the most part, help get around unqualified buyers, right? Or they can at least help weed them out, right? And that's both true for a purchase and the sales side. That's more prevalent on the sales side though, because you get an agent that comes walking through the door. Hey, I got a client that wants to buy your house. Then they lock it up under contract for the next 2 weeks while they fiddle with financing behind the scenes, only for it to collapse. And then, well, it's like, now we're back to the drawing board. Great. Right. And then worse yet, it has that implication on it now where it's like, well, there was an offer on the house, but there isn't anymore. Was there something wrong with the house? It's like, no. And then you got to like explain it every time. It's like, no, it was financing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember what the stat is, but it's a little over 80%. I think it's like 82 or 83. This is at least last year's stat. Like 82%, let's call it, of deals that fall apart are strictly related to financing.
Yeah.
Right. Which is like a mind-blowing number, but I believe it given what I see.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, agents like, so when someone comes to you, right, you have the conversation. It's probably one of the first conversations you have, I'm going to guess, is that, are you qualified?
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
So what kind of proof are you looking for from these people?
Typically it's, whether it's me sending them to a mortgage broker or certain contacts I have, and then hearing from the mortgage broker directly saying, yeah, they're good to go for this amount, or it's, providing the pre-approval letter or whatever that may be. I like to chat or actually get confirmation just with whoever's doing the financing.
Mm-hmm.
Just say, hey, look, we're going to be looking at houses. What's a good range? What can we do? And then that way, I think it's important too to not look at the top of your price range,
right?
Just because you want to be comfortable. Things are going to come up, whether it's your furnace goes or whatever it may be. You want to have room to play with, right?
So you actually do like encourage people to shop below whatever their max pre-qualification is?
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, I think it's important. And there's some cases where, they're looking for, a rare house and it comes up and it's priced a little bit high, but then we can negotiate down a little bit. And it all depends on that person's situation, but it's always nice to shop lower than what your top of the limit is.
Well, even for us, like when we pre-qualify people, we often say, like, just so you know, this is the maximum that you can qualify for, but we would usually recommend you go to XYZ, like, which is usually a little bit lower or whatever, just because, no one wants to live house poor. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's a terrible way. Like when my wife and I first bought our place, I was 21 when we bought our first condo.
Okay.
So I'm 34 now. So that's 13 years ago. I'm so old. But 21. And, I mean, the definition of house poor, I mean, I'll let you decide, but, I was a full-time student still, cause I was still graduating from university. I was taking my honors of business at the time.
Yeah.
My wife was a part-time, like waitress. That's what she was at the time, right? Because she was like just finishing her schooling kind of thing. She was also pregnant because we had just gotten married the year before, and we bought a place, right? And so you can imagine that when we bought this place, like, first of all, I mean, it was a nice condo. It was a nice first place, but we had no furniture. Like, I think we didn't even have a kitchen table. We had like a futon that someone was throwing away. Like for like 6 months, we had nothing. And looking back on it, I'm like, wow, what an adventure. That was a lot of fun. But I also like don't recommend that to people. Like I'm like, if you can have something to sit on, probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you just come home and be like, there's no furniture. Like, and it's hard to describe just how little furniture we had. It felt like we had never moved in. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Like we had a bed. That was it. So we could put the kid to sleep. That was it. And we can go sit on our futon. But yeah, anyways. So do you have any big takeaways? If you had to sum this up, let's say in 2 to 3 little tidbits, just because we're over an hour already. If you had to sum it up, what would be the 2 or 3 main takeaways?
Yeah, number one, I think would be get to know the agent that you're going to hire. Ask them a list of questions, get to know, see if they're a good fit. And if they're not, then interview some other ones. I think it's important that you build a good connection and you're excited about working with that realtor and you know he's going to work hard for you. So I think that's important. And, talk to friends. Everyone buys and sells homes. So see who friends are used. That's kind of, the majority of my business comes from referrals. So talk to your friends. If you know somebody, then if they liked working with that agent, then you might like working with them too. And maybe they're not a good fit, but just don't be afraid to talk to different realtors.
Talk to people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the referral idea.
Yeah. And then what would be another good takeaway? I think
I'll make a comment on the referral thing first then, just because I think a lot of people, underestimate a compliment, like underestimate a referral, but we are as a human species significantly more likely to complain than we are to compliment.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have someone who is like praising somebody, then you know that they've done really, really well.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're more likely to be like, that guy sucked, than we are to be like, yeah, he did good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess something else too is, buying and selling a home, there's lots of moving parts and, it can be stressful, but try to have fun with it. It's an exciting time. And, you want to bring professionalism and fun together, I think is a good mix.
I would agree. Well, with that, we will end the live stream. Thank you very much, Dominic Montpetit, for joining us. And I look forward to having you on for future shows.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks so much, Conrad.
Take care.